Hello everyone, this is lesson 2 of unit 5 where we are looking at the internet and in particular the internet and the World Wide Web. Okay, the last lesson we looked at the differences between those two terms and how we kind of access the World Wide Web using the internet. Today we are going to look at how we retrieve websites, and as we now call them, URLs. And these two terms, session cookies and persistent cookies. Okay, I'm sure you will have heard of a cookie before, especially in computer science. But we are going to look at the differences between these two terms. So first of all, let's have a look at this question. When you're making a phone call, a video call, or even sending a message, how do we choose who we are sending it to? As we know, in our phones, we have contacts. There's not a chance that we could ever remember all of our contacts' numbers, 10, 11 sequence of numbers. We would never remember all of those for all of our contacts. Okay, maybe one or two, but certainly not all of them. That's why we have contacts. We simply put in the number and save it as their name. We're only human. We're going to work much better with names. So the internet works in exactly the same way. When we type in a URL, okay, or a website, a web address, the computers work in a very similar manner to the contacts in our phones. We type in a website that we know, okay, that we can understand. Google.com, Amazon.com. It's a company name followed by some kind of domain. So we know that as humans. But what happens in the real world is that IP addresses are actually the contacts that are being contacted. When we access Amazon.com, for example, we are contacting Amazon through their IP address. Now, there's not a chance that we would ever understand the IP addresses of all the companies that we access. That's why we type in URLs. But just like your phone book does, your contacts in your phone, a URL is just a readable format of an IP address. Now, it is obviously a lot more complicated than a phone book, but we'll dive into it and see what happens. What we have is a domain name system, okay, or DNS server. This is essentially just a giant phone book. It's got all the contacts of all the websites that we go on, okay, and it translates these domain names, these websites, into an IP address. So it's like having your mum's telephone number and just saved it as, I'll use the UK number. This isn't my mum's number, don't worry. But it's the same as that. I know my mum and this is her number. But when I'm going to Amazon.com, I won't know Amazon's IP address. It's gonna be a long series of numbers and I'm never gonna ever remember them. So when I type in Amazon.com, what happens is I access this DNS server to see if it's got the IP address for Amazon.com. So here we have some simple domains. Okay, we've got Wikipedia, Google, Amazon, and their IP addresses that go with it. All you need to think of it as your phone book with the addresses and contacts that you know. Okay, your personal contacts. Difference is that this is on a worldwide scale. Hence why I refer to it as a phone book. Now you don't really see these anymore, but 10, 15 years ago, you'd have a really thick, huge book with all the companies in your local area and their phone numbers. Now, obviously in your phone books, you don't have everybody's numbers saved, but a domain name system will. It will have all of the websites, not in the world, but most of them saved with their IP addresses. So here's how it works in particular. Again, a common question that we see in the iGCSE exams, okay, and you have to explain in detail what happens when you access a website. You type in a website, a URL. The web browser, whether it's Safari, Chrome, Edge, Firefox, requests the IP address from the DNS server. Okay, it's asking the DNS server for a domain name. Okay, if it's got the IP address of this domain name that you've typed in. If it's got it, the server sends the IP address to the web browser. So it'll say, yep, I've got it. Here's the IP address. That's then the link between you and the website that you want to go on. Our web browser can now send a request for the web page that we want to go on to the IP address. So let's just go back a step. So one, I type in wikipedia.org. My computer contacts the DNS server, which it then responds with an IP address for Wikipedia. My browser, let's say I'm using Firefox, then sends a request for the page I'm looking for. I will then send a request for this specific web page to the IP address, and the web server will send me back the HTML file to my browser. Like we discussed in the last lesson, we know what HTML is. So it sends back the file, and then my web browser displays this on the page in a nice readable format. Again, a common question, guys, in the iGCSE exam, which is rather simple when you think of it. Now, I've mentioned there a couple of times a web server. We contact the web server to access a website. Like it says there, a web server is just a special kind of computer that hosts or holds websites, okay? Now, every company doesn't have a web server, but companies that have websites will store their websites on a web server somewhere in the world, whether it's their own, whether it's a third party. All it means is that their website lives on a web server. Once it's on a web server, anyone in the world can access this website. We just need to utilize the DNS server to find them. So every time we type in a domain, we get put in the direction of the website so we can access the web pages. So a simple analogy that we can put it in is, imagine a massive library. In this library, there are lots of books. Okay, these books are the websites that we're looking for. The shelves that the books live on are the servers. When we want to find a book, we go to the librarian and then we ask them, where is the book? Where is the URL? And the librarian will simply go, it's on shelf number 3, aisle 4. We go and find it. Instead of going to the shelf, we go to a web server and then we can download the website to our browser. Then we move on to this term cookies. So I'm pretty sure you will have seen a message regarding cookies at some point in your life. Okay, whatever website you've tried to go on, it comes up with a message saying this website uses cookies. Now, what happened was a few years ago, it became law that every website that stores cookies needs to tell users about them, because before that they didn't, and cookies were just being stored. But it's now a law that they have to tell you that they're storing cookies about you. Now, they're not harmful. What they are designed to do is make your experience better, designed to improve your website experience. Whether it's making it more personalized, whether it's making it just easier to access because it saves your password, for example. There's many different types of cookies that we're going to look at. There's another analogy here. We go into a bakery, and every time we visit, the baker gives you a little note that you keep in your pocket. This helps the baker remember your favorite type of bread or cookie every time you visit. When you go to that bakery, they know, because they've got your cookie stored, what's your favorite type. You don't have to ask for it, they don't have to bake it, it's simply there for you to collect. Now, what this means in terms of a browser is that it stores the data in a file somewhere. It's just a general text file, there's nothing fancy, but it does store information about you and your personal experience or personal data. This file, this cookie data, is stored within the browser, so that whether it's Chrome or Safari or whatever browser it is, can access this cookie whenever you go to access this website again in the future. And as we said, here's the message that generally comes up on websites. Uses of them: saving personal information, okay, nice and simple, whether it's a password or a username, okay, just saving your general information. Yes, we've got to be careful if it's saving sensitive information, but it does make it easier to go on the website if information is saved that we don't have to type in. Tracking user preferences, so your likes or preferences. If you go into Amazon and you're always searching for similar products, it will track this and it will know what you like to look at, okay? And it'll give you recommendations and just things tailored to you. Okay, Netflix, showing you recommendations of series that you might like. Again, this information will be stored in a cookie. Keeping items in an online shopping cart. If you add items to your cart, okay, this needs to be saved somewhere, because as you know, when you navigate through the website, you move away from the cart, but we would like to save them in there. So every time you add a product to a shopping cart online, it is saved in a cookie. And similar to the first one, login credentials. This is just very similar to storing personal information, whether it saves your username and password, just makes it easier for us every time we go to log in. Example scenario. Okay, so we go to a store and log in with a username and password. The website saves a cookie that remembers our login details. So it saves our username and password, and we just simply log in nice and easy. We don't have to type it in and all the rest of it. We browse the site and add some items to our cart and then close the browser. When we come back later on, the cookie that saved this information will still be there, okay, unless you've manually deleted them. So the cookie that was saved originally will show you your cart, and it will have all the information still there because it was saved in a cookie. So that's all it means, guys. It's saving information about you for later use. Now, these two terms we need to differentiate: session cookies and persistent. A clue's in the name, but we'll break it down anyway. So a session cookie is temporary, okay? They are deleted as soon as we close the browser. These help websites remember actions during a single visit. So a shopping cart when you aren't logged in, if you're not signed into an account on a website and you're adding things to a cart, it will be stored using a session cookie. If you go to a website and it logs you in automatically, that means the cookie must have been saved from the previous visit, which means it will be a persistent cookie. It's a permanent cookie. So think of persistent as permanent, and this is for the longer run. It'll help remember things for a longer time. And that's the difference, guys, okay? Session for that individual session, and persistent for the longer term. Just to finish up, a nice simple fill in the blanks. When a user enters a URL, the domain name is sent to a DNS server. Okay, the DNS server looks up the domain name and sends the associated IP address to the web browser. The web browser now requests the web page to the IP address for the web server. The web server then sends the web page written in HTML to the browser. Nice and simple. And then finally, the difference between a session cookie and a persistent cookie. What we've just looked at, session is temporary, persistent is permanent or long-term. So examples of each, a session cookie will be a single time access to a shop where you add to your cart, and a persistent cookie could be your username and login saved for a long term. So that was lesson 2, guys, of Unit 5. There are 3 more, and like I said, Unit 5 ties in with Unit 2 nicely, and we are making steady progress in this unit. So thank you very much, and I'll see you next time.